welcome back to DogFoodCon. We are joined by Jon Norstrom, who gave a talk. What was your talk called?
It was called A Better Vue of JavaScript.
Okay, and what?
Yes. I thought that going with a pun might catch some eyes.
Did it?
Supposedly, yeah. Because, so we had the room filled. There were people standing in the back and whatnot.
Nice.
I looked for chairs, but I couldn't find any. But, yeah, it went pretty smooth. I've done it before, just in like a longer format, like a 4-hour session, and I'm used to teaching.
Yeah.
And so I'm used to like a big back and forth conversation.
Yeah.
So just having to just ramble for an hour was not the greatest.
So what's the gist of your talk?
It's just a really brief introduction to the Vue framework. It's like, why is it maybe preferred to some other frameworks, or why is it maybe less preferred? It's just like if you bought like a tutorial online for a couple bucks kind of thing, that's pretty much what you could get out of it.
Okay.
Basic like to-do app kind of thing, simple API consumptions, and then just kind of learning the pattern of work around that framework. Mm-hmm. So the main idea is that whenever you're learning something new, sometimes it can be hard to figure out what's important and what's not. And then especially trying to search stuff on Google or whatever, just being able to get it in the right context, I think, really can help you narrow down your own results to the more useful stuff. That way you can teach yourself later.
Yeah.
So that's really the goal, is to get everyone within the right context, so that way they can take it as they will later and not be completely lost.
Yeah. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm new to Vue. Like I've seen the term, and I've went to their website and stuff. Right. But like, what do you use it for?
It's mostly for SPAs, single page apps. When I learned it, it was a single page app, but it was just massive and it's very complicated. The app that I learned it on, but it can really just spin up something really simple in like 2 hours if you kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like React in that way, where it was kind of packaged as this catch-all for things. Only it just kind of takes away a lot of the complexities behind it.
What kind of complexities?
React uses JSX, which is pretty confusing to, I don't know, at least it was for me.
Yeah. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. There's a parade of terms and I'm like, whoa, JavaScript things.
Yeah. I actually sort of don't know what it is. Like, I know how to write it, and I recognize it when I see it. But it's not just normal JavaScript. It's JavaScript like mixed with HTML and all this other stuff.
Oh, that stuff. I got you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like it's not easy to pick up on, and especially it's not easy to teach.
Yeah.
And so, so that's one of the selling points for Vue, is it's very easy to teach. It uses just basic JavaScript.
Yeah.
Very simple syntax. Like people who've only learned JS like over the past couple of weeks could feasibly pick up Vue, and with some guidance in terms of like what goes where, they could write the rest, because it's just simple JavaScript at that point.
That makes sense. Like my background, like I started with, JSPs and Java and stuff, which is just literally a template with HTML, and then you piece together the stuff. And like I, sat down and tried to learn React, and that was the part I found most confusing. Was now my HTML and my JavaScript are like the same
literally
thing.
one and the same.
Yeah, and it was, I don't know, it was hard to understand where the boundaries were. And I was with somebody, I had experience, right? So like new people, I could see that being very confusing for sure. Mm-hmm. So how is Vue different in that way?
It's just, it's very easy to teach. It's very easy to learn.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the biggest part. It's very intuitive.
Yeah.
It organizes everything into every single file is a full component, like top to bottom.
Okay. So
like your one file will have the HTML template for that component. It'll have all the methods for that component, all the CSS for that component. It's everything packaged together very nicely.
Okay.
So it's very easy to just like pluck them out and put them in different places within your application.
You mentioned that it was really good for single page applications. I've heard that term a lot, applied to a lot of different things, and I gotta say, I don't really understand like what what's a single page application? Like, how is it different from, like, I guess multi-page applications would have been the norm at some point? Like, how do you
So if you
define
think of like older websites that have like hyperlinks that take you to just a different part of the website, and then the URL changes, but what actually happens is the whole thing breaks down and completely reloads again on a different page.
Right.
Okay.
Single page applications, they make you think that you're going to different pages,
Right.
but actually you're just removing HTML and then injecting new HTML.
Oh.
And then, so you've never actually left the original page you were on.
Right.
It just looks like it. And so it's way faster. Most things nowadays are probably single page applications as well.
Yeah, so it's like everything's operating in the same context or the same box. I got a box and I might take things out of the box, put things back in the box.
Yep.
But it's the same box, so I don't have to build the cardboard every time I click a link.
Yeah. Yeah. So like if you have any like backend API calls or something that happen when the page loads, then you don't need to remake those calls later on. And so that's typically how you get your site's speed to go way up. Is it just by not having to do a bunch of this other scaffolding every single time you want to go to a different page.
You just reduce the number of things that you're doing multiple times that you could just do once.
Yeah. And then it's become like a hot topic, a hot term.
Yeah, yeah.
With just, everyone wants things like really fast. And right now, like instant feedback. And so that really caters to that. All these other SPA things, like React can do it as well and whatnot. And like I think that's where a lot of them got their traction, is by being able to do stuff like that.
It definitely makes it look and feel like a native app in that way, in the sense of like, it's a subtle thing, but there's no microsecond blink of blank page followed by redrawing the entire thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Spinner.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now we have a spinner.
You can never go wrong with a spinner.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
So, what kind of stuff do you build with Vue?
What kind of stuff do I build with Vue? Mostly teaching tools. So just different like miniature like single function applications that will kind of like feature or deep dive into a certain part of Vue.
Okay.
Or the client that I was at previous to my current one used Vue for their entire like log of like old newspaper articles and all the stuff that their CMS was spitting out as well. We used Vue to take in all of that stuff and organize it and like put it into like a big online booklet basically. And so like I just had to like jump into the deep end on that one.
Yeah.
Because it was already somewhat built out. It's a very large scale application. So that's really how I learned a lot of it. I did a lot of templating with that stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays it's just small little teaching tools.
You like teaching this stuff?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I don't know what I was gonna ask there.
Well, who are you usually teaching? You just go to conferences, or like you're like, well, I've got a school, or what's going on with that?
There's another company, Tech Talent South. They're kind of spread out all around, but they have an office in Columbus, and I've kind of been affiliated with them for like the last 2 years, doing web development, teaching in like the evenings and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's mostly been that. Improving the company I work for, they have internal classes that any employee can just put on a class, and then any other employee who wants to take it can go for it.
Nice.
So I've taught Vue to some of our other improvers and whatnot, just to try to like widen our collective knowledge base.
So I'm pretty interested in that too, because I teach online, and finding tools that are simple enough for people to be able to explain concepts without the framework getting in the way. Like for instance, like we have things where we talk about React and stuff, but there's a lot of stuff around the ecosystem, and it's hard for beginners to take it all in. And the idea that there's something simple that's directed just literally to the view to isolate this one concept.
There's still like a little bit of stuff around Vue that you kind of have to tell beginners to just ignore that for now, or just this is how it works, believe it, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to trust it for a minute.
Yeah.
But there's certainly far less of that than in some other frameworks. Like I've tried to learn Angular 4 or 5 times, and I can't do it.
No.
Yeah, I get past the tutorial and I'm on my own, and I'm like, nope.
No, yeah.
It doesn't click. I don't get it. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's better in that way as well.
No, I mean,
But-
I'm using Angular at work all the time, and I guess I won't ask how would you compare Vue to Angular. These are these parallel things where I'm using Angular, I could use Vue instead, or
I mean, I'm sure there are. There's lots of money to be made about blogging about the differences between
oh god,
Vue, React, and Angular. I think there's been at least a half dozen of those written.
in the last 30 seconds.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I can't answer to the Angular part, and I've kind of already answered to the React a little
Yeah.
bit. I just know that it just generally people pick it up way quicker, and that feels nice.
That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's also less
definitely gonna check it
frustrating
out.
for me having to try to like teach it to someone and not have to explain a certain thing multiple times.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can make examples simple, it helps a lot for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're building a whole application too, and like maybe you don't want to spend that much time on your front end. Like maybe it's nice to have something that just spins up quick,
Yeah.
and you're not spending all this time on all these different files and all these different pages and. I don't know. I mean, it seems like you do everything in the same file. Maybe I just have a really simple app and I have like 3 pages. I need like 3
Yeah.
files and I'm
That's
done.
it.
Like that
Yeah.
would be that would be way good
Yeah.
if what I want to focus on is my back end and all the complicated calculations I'm doing in this hypothetical app, and just showing
Right.
them on the screen is super easy.
Yeah.
I just want it to be simple and get it done because I like front-end development or whatever.
Right. Front-end development gets shit on all the time.
Especially by other front-end developers
I know.
who hate all the things that all the other front-end developers are doing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really fun practice we have.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the JavaScript ecosystem is very like I
It's
don't
like a
know.
dog chasing its own
Competitive.
tail.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like people reinvent the same things over and over and name them the same stuff, and it's
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
That's wild.
yeah, and then they fight about it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I never really quite understood the practice of that, but
Yeah.
it's certainly true. It happens. I don't really get it.
Yeah.
I guess just everyone wants their thing to end up being the one that gets traction,
Yeah.
and then they get to leave their job. To be able to support this thing full time.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah.
It's just it would be better on some level to kind of work together and stuff.
Right.
You know what we should do? We should make a new framework where everyone works together, and then everyone has to use that instead.
That's good. We should
But we'll
force
force
them.
them.
to do it.
Yeah.
It would be better than Angular and Vue and React all put together. So everyone who's doing those things is now wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you said appealed to me because, I've been running meetups locally.
Okay.
And I got people to show up and stuff. And then, the particular tech we were using, we would have to spend the entire meetup
my
getting
God.
their system ready to build a thing in it.
Yeah.
And then they're leaving. And then they never came back because we never even really talked
Right.
about the thing they were interested in.
Yeah.
Right.
And that drove me crazy. I don't know. That's unrelated maybe, but.
No, yeah, it's true. Sometimes the setup is the hardest part, but especially with all this other, pretty much almost any JavaScript framework at this point,
Yeah.
it's just like a little library. So
Right.
one line of command line, and then you're all set, ready to go. As long as your machine is typically up to date.
Yeah.
So that's the certainly the nicer part about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I used to teach class on Rails,
Okay.
and that was always such a hard setup.
Yeah.
Yes. I did. One of the first things I did when I started getting into development was to go to a general assembly class that was just like a day-long workshop or whatever, and they said, here's all the stuff that you should install on your machine before class and stuff, and I didn't have any trouble with this, but
Right.
a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And we go to the workshop, and then we spend the whole time helping the people who didn't get the stuff installed,
Right.
install the stuff. And I'm like, well, I didn't even get to do anything because I already know how to install things on my machine,
Yeah.
And I mean, not to say, that it's bad that they didn't. Of course, if you're a beginner and you're going to a class, you want help with that stuff. But it's if it takes so long, you take away from the really important stuff you wanted to get to.
Yeah, that was always a pain point. So even with Rails, the difference between Mac and Windows users is
Oh, God.
vast.
Yeah.
The setup for Mac is super easy because you already have like it comes with Ruby already.
Yeah.
You just download the gem, put it in the right path, and you're ready to go.
Mm.
Windows is like 3 hoops and 2
Oh, yeah.
circuses just to get Ruby installed.
Yes.
And then after that, you need a different command line because PowerShell doesn't do shit
Yeah.
Right.
for that, at least.
Yeah.
And so that was always a pain.
Yeah.
But
We tried to solve that problem with
Oh
Docker.
my god, what a disaster.
Yeah.
And then we spent the entire thing just talking about Docker because Docker didn't run either.
Because Docker does not run on Windows.
Like, I had no idea that Docker was not a Windows thing.
Oh my
Is it
god.
not?
I mean, it technically is, but like
You have-
you
I mean,
have to have
isn't
Windows
that Docker's
Pro.
whole thing is
That's what we thought.
to be able to just like, all right, here you go, here's a container, hand it out, and everyone's good to go.
Everybody showed up with a Windows Home machine. Like people would bring their laptops from home, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then they would try to set up, and then we found out quickly Docker is literally not a thing on Windows Home.
Yeah, you have to get a separate like container for like your VMs, and you have to enable something in your BIOS to get it to work if you want it to work, but usually you can only do this on Windows Pro or Enterprise.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so there's a lot of like you can get around it kind of, but only if you're like a super user. Like
Yeah.
Right.
we failed so.
Yeah, like we were setting this up. Like we want new people, like trying to make it easy for them, and
Right.
we made it way harder.
Oh my god, it was so much harder. It was like, just install the 5 things.
Here's a simple little thing. Let's spend an hour on it and
Yeah.
scare you for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
be a conservative estimate of how much
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Oh my god, where everybody has a different problem, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's installing 5 different things and setting them up seems like a lot, but
Yeah.
trust us, compared to the alternative, it's
I've
fine.
used it before. I've never had to set it up by myself. And I pray for the day that never happens for me.
Yeah.
Depending on your platform, it's easy.
Yeah,
but-
Linux is super easy.
Oh yeah,
Right.
like it's so easy. You think, wow, this is going to solve my problems
Yeah.
when I go to
Right.
a meetup and people have Windows Home. It doesn't
Yeah.
solve your problem.
Yeah.
So
Is there any other tech you're into?
Not as much.
No.
No, mostly web dev, stuff like that. I don't know. It's easy. So
No,
I stay with that.
No, I mean,
Plus, there's a breadth of knowledge, so like you can still continue learning
yeah.
while just mainly staying in that area.
Yeah.
I spent about a year at a company doing data ETL, and it was like on a Windows machine with this super arcane GUI system for ETL stuff like that called like Alteryx or something, and that was, I think that did it for me. Spending a year doing like just importing so many different kinds of files and like remapping columns and then putting it onto a database, and then you have to like all this other SQL stuff just to
Yeah.
make it work. It's like this is not great.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of work to do in the browser too. So.
Yeah.
yeah.
I was like, I'm happy that I learned the things that I did from it, but I certainly don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
It's
Yeah.
more gratifying to just do something and
Right.
be able to see it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even though, like, if you had asked me, I'd be like, well, front-end development isn't the thing that I like the most. But in practice, like, after solving really difficult problems that are hard to see and you have to test all these different ways to find them, like, writing a little thing and then pop, it's on the screen, there it is. I'm like,
Does it
oh,
look
man.
right? Does
Oh,
it
yeah.
act right?
It
Great.
feels super satisfying. Oh, the box moved from here to
Oh
here.
my god,
Like,
I'm gonna keep
bet.
doing this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to be able to move up and down the stack a little bit in my life, but it's
Yeah.
quick and it's a quick win when you can just pop something up there like I
It
did
is.
that.
Yeah.
I did that thing. That was mine. I made it.
Yeah. It's very gratifying. I think it teaches you also to celebrate the little tiny things
Yeah.
instead of just getting beaten down because you didn't solve the whole thing.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times back in development it's harder to see the little wins, and you're just so focused on like the whole API call or the whole something
Yeah.
that when it doesn't get done, you don't feel that accomplishment of all the steps that you took to get there
Yeah.
because you didn't really see them, you know.
Yeah.
And so certainly with web dev, it's easier to see those little things and that little bit of reinforcement. It also makes teaching it way easier.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can, instant feedback is always
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Instant feedback for students is super key.
Yeah, remember when you were like, why don't we do a workshop and we will start by writing unit tests?
Hey!
Everyone had so much fun.
Oh, everybody loved it, yeah.
I
that
mean,
was definitely
I mean, they did legitimately enjoy it, I think. But, like, also, you go, if you're new to this, at the end of this workshop, you're like, what did I actually do?
Yeah, I have code that calls other code. Ooh.
Yeah.
It doesn't even, nobody was like, no, this feels good.
Yeah. I learned with testing, actually, is how... So I went to Dev Bootcamp a while back, and the way that they taught us immediately with like Ruby was they were just handing us files with just a bunch of RSpec code written in it, and they were like, hey, run this command. So you run it, and then you see like these 10 tests fail, and then they had basically like all the functions or all the problems or something in a different file, and they were like, just write your answers here, and then when you think you got it, just run the thing again, and then see if any of your tests pass.
Oh yeah,
right?
Isn't that how like the Ruby koans work or whatever?
Yeah.
That, like they use to.
It's something like that. And it's like that's how anyone that went through Dev Bootcamp learned how to code, was by watching tests finally pass once they've written the right stuff.
Right.
So I think I have a bias towards it because I don't know. I still just get that like that. It's like a Pavlov.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
It's-
I'm like, wow, it's actually a really good
Pavlovian,
idea
yeah.
to get people like really excited about that green pass.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, whoo, this means I'm making progress.
Right. Red F or little green dot. Which do you prefer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
It made it mean something.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I still really like writing tests.
Yeah.
I don't always have time, but
I do too. It's just hard to get new people into it sometimes. That's all. Because the people's idea of software is always the front end stuff, like because that's what they see, and that's the thing they're used to using.
Right.
And these abstract ideas in the back is like, and I don't know, it's just different. And people, I mean, like there's a certain subset of people that are like,
Yeah. Right.
yeah. All right.
the client that I'm at right now is doing a manual to automation conversion for testing, and so I'm on that team, just like building out the huge like test suite, and then like writing all the regression tests and all that other stuff. And it's been like that's been like the deepest I've ever gotten into it.
Yeah.
Like I've been at that place since I think May, and like that's the only code I've written since May is just like Ruby Cucumber.
Yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about that because I used to be QA in manual testing before I was a developer, and like the thing that they started having us do was like Selenium WebDriver tests where you just pretend to be a user, and I don't know, like, because I don't really like the developers like at my company. We don't test front end code. Like, probably should. We don't do any of it though. Like,
Right.
if it's not Java, we're not testing it. It seems to be the prevailing philosophy, but like, what kinds of stuff do you use as a developer to test that like maybe would be, I don't know if it's like different than what you would expect like a QA testing team to use, or if it's the same.
We try to replace as much of the manual QA stuff as we can.
Right.
You can't obviously replace everything because there's just the human element of stuff that you just, to code it would take so much effort and time that you would defeat the purpose in trying to automate it to save effort and time. But it's like the simple, like some of the things, just huge like user flows. Like, can I create an account, then browse the site, pick a thing, and then like check out with it? And so like we can do that in 10 seconds, right? And then we can do it like hundreds of times, and to make sure like it consistently works or something. It's like that stuff you try to replace with automation. But some of the other stuff, like make sure that these things are in a certain order, left to right, and then also top to down, like stuff like that. Like you can't really, it would be so difficult to try to automate that.
Right. It's
To
like
tell code to try to like pick out all these elements from the screen and then compare all of them and make sure, like, it's just so much easier to scan it really quick with your eyes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's those like long, repetitive tasks that are the best candidates for automation.
Yeah.
Because really, like, we would do smoke tests that were just like, does the app basically work and
Right.
not obviously blow up when you do something totally normal?
Right.
Like, and you'd spend so much time in a week on that, doing it in every environment, and
Yeah.
like, it just wastes so much time, and it's better if you can just let the computer do it. But
Yeah.
you know, but we'd always, I guess, make a distinction between those type of tests and like unit tests, which are the things that I suppose is what we think of as unit tests only happen on the back end during, you know,
Right.
like build time before you ever deploy it. But everything after it, I guess we sort of
Yeah.
let
Typically,
QA do it.
typically everything afterwards just gets dumped on QA's desk.
right,
Yeah.
right, and it's just
From what I've seen, open source projects actually tend to be way better about it because they don't
Well, they
have
are.
QA teams and they don't have meetings where they talk about these things. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes they have meetings, but like it's not like part of the process.
Well, when you don't have like the resources to have a QA team, right? But you still want whatever the hell you're building to work and be able to be sellable, then like that sort of like corners you into having to test it.
Yeah.
And then because you're doing it yourself, you're like, fuck this, I'm gonna write tests to do it myself.
right, right.
That way I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why a lot of them are really good about it, is
For sure.
because that responsibility is just thrown right back in their face, and no one wants to have to do that all week.
No, I don't want to like you
Solve
know,
your own problem.
like you know they want people to submit code from the internet, and it's like you can't be. I'm not going to test everything that
Yeah.
everybody on the internet submits. So
Right.
like it has to.
There's
be
a lot of
automated.
like, yeah, if you like look through like a lot of the open source things, like the pull request like list of rules or whatever, like a lot of them that have tests already, that'll be one of the rules for the pull request, is that you should also have like included tests.
Yeah.
That way before we do it, we can run all your tests and see that you didn't like break everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Actually, one of the things that always this thing that I saw that just totally peeved me at the time. Like, I saw there was a job ad I was looking at some company that they part of their advertising for potential candidates was, you know, we don't have a QA team because we expect our developers to test their own stuff, and we have very high standards for our developers, and you can tell because we don't employ QA.
I don't know that that's a.
I don't think that works the way you think this works. Like, as a former QA person, I mean, I don't know if I really want to interview at your job that's like, QA is useless and only for lazy developers.
Oh no.
But it's just a different perspective that you have as somebody who uses the app as a user versus someone who uses it as a dev. Like,
Yeah.
like you can't think of everything. And I know this now, having been on both sides of the fence, like that. Like, I used to get so frustrated that my developers had no idea how to use the apps that they worked on. I was like, come on, guys. But now that I'm developing some things that I never used to QA, I'm like, I have no idea how this thing works from
Right.
a user perspective. It's great to have people who do know that. And,
Yeah.
you know, you can't just discount that just because you want your developers to write unit tests.
Well, yeah, and also times, like, how often do you write something and then someone uses it in a way that you never imagined it would get used?
Right.
Like, you're like, oh, just leave it up to the public to just
Oh, yeah.
bastardize this entire thing that I blood, sweat, and tears poured it into.
Right,
And,
or just something that's as stupid as like you right click and click copy. Who does that? Like,
Right.
you know, I would never do that if I could possibly avoid it. But some people, that's the only way that they do it. And
Yeah.
I would
Oh,
never
yeah,
think
that's-
to like,
yeah.
I would never think to
Just-
test something like that.
right. The apps get built according to how the developers use apps.
Right.
And unfortunately, you have like 4 developers and you have how many thousands of users. Like, someone's going to come up with a different way of using it than one of your 4 people.
That's true.
Even if they're like the closest to perfect developers as you can get.
Well, it's even worse because you get blind spots for
Yeah.
for all of these things. Like nobody, like I don't know.
Your grandma uses a computer very differently than a perfect
Yeah,
developer.
she's like, here, I'm gonna bring in my grandson Proxy.
Right. Right.
Is his name Proxy or he's a proxy for a grandson? I'm not.
It's both.
really
That's
clear.
how he got his name.
We talked about ambiguity on the
Yeah.
last podcast. Like, you gotta fix that.
The way you said it, it would be the grandson's name is Proxy.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a proxy grandson.
yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Or no, that's someone filling in for a grandson. Yeah, I don't know.
Mysteries.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
of course.
Do you have anything to promote?
Nope.
Twitter?
No?
You on Twitter?
I
LinkedIn?
am, but no one needs to see that shit. It's just burns and just stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
Stupid
no,
Twitter.
just see
Yeah.
me on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'll never see
Yeah.
you again.
Yeah.
It's fine.
See me
Perfect.
around. Yeah, that's all.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
so much, John.